Hello everyone, and my dear subscribers. Today's video will be about Bard, aka the Last Bard. They were given such names because Last Bard used to be the frequently seen phrases for public party finding board. Basically meaning, we have the DPS classes, we just need a Bard to join us to start the raid. It's been a while since the phrase became last support with the release of Paladin. At this point you might ask, is having a support in a party that important? The answer in my opinion is yes and no. No, because for endgame contents which have become easy after experience and passing border item level, they are not that important. On the other hand, yes, because they take tremendous role for relatively new challenging endgame contents. The harder the raid becomes, there's gonna be more reliance on burst DPS for times when the enemy boss is impaired. And so having that extra buff is going to help out immensely. Needless to say, they increase the chances of survivability of the whole party. Now let's get into the details about the Bard class and see what kind of skills they have to manage such an important role. There will be translations in my own words for the skills, and they are most likely to have a different title for the Western release. Although Bards are commonly known as a buffer, they do have an identity skill called the Serenade of Salvation, which heals all the allies including the Bard. And one of the two class engravings for Bard, called the Desperate Salvation, buffs this heal by adding an extra heal of certain percent of Bard's own health at the very last. And then there is the Rogue version, which is the DPS Bard, and they use the Truthful Bravery engraving to increase the Bard's skill damage by 10, 15, 20% and critical chances by 10%. I'm only going to cover the Salvation Bard because this is more common of the two types, and because they are the preferred type of the Bard for parties. Almost every Bard has a setup for the heal, and only a handful of them will set up for DPS for solo carrying contents or when they're bored in the KR server. There is no one standard skill tree for Bards, they pretty much depend on personal preference and the type of raid. For instance, the Rhythm Buckshot is a counter skill which a Bard will use if the raid requires a lot of counter gimmicks. However, it can be interchangeable with other skills to acquire more identity gauge and so forth. So here are the most commonly used skills for PvE contents. A Bard's skills are largely divided into 5 groups. 1. Party Buff. 2. Enemy Debuff. 3. Party Shield. 4. Bubble Gathering. 5. The Identity skills. First, let's look at the buff skills. The Heavenly Play increases attack speed by 16%, increases the party mana recovery rate by 40%, and party attack power by adding 15% of Bard's own attack power, an additional 6% attack power boost to the party members within 28 meters range. And then there is a sound wave vibration, which gives attack power increase to the allies inside the AoE. I used to run from this skill as a DPS class when I didn't know what it was. Here is how to manage these two skills. Because the attack buffs from Heavenly Play and Sound Wave Vibration don't stack on top of each other, it's very important that you use them apart from each other. The skill cooldown of Heavenly Play is longer and the effect lasts for 8 seconds, so use the Sound Wave Vibration at least 8 seconds after the Heavenly Play. And lastly, there is an identity skill called the Serenade of Bravery. Try to coordinate time for the skill with the DPS classes so they can use their own buff and use major DPS skills. Second, the debuff skills. Bards can apply debuffs like slow, attack power decrease, or most importantly the stigma effect, which increases the damage taken by the enemies by 10%. Such skills which include the stigma effect are Sound Shock, Dancing Heart, Rhapsody of Light, Cluster of Notes, and Stigma. From the 5 skills, 2 most commonly used skills are the Sound Shock and the Dancing Heart. With both skills in the slot, it's possible to almost constantly maintain the debuff on the enemies. You can choose to use the other 3 skills, but they either have tripod for other use or are inconvenient to use. Now let's move on to the party shields. There are 3 representative shield skills of a bard, which are Recital of Protection, Rhapsody of Light, Wind of Music, and the awakening skill Symphonia. Use Wind of Music as frequently as possible to provide a party shield and supply for the bubble. As for the Recital of Protection, use the skill timely with enemies' big patterns for the party saves, and to save mana. The Rhapsody of Light can provide huge amount of shield, but the AoE is kinda small. And unless the enemy frequently does attacks which need super saves, there is a high chance that the skill will just sit there not being used. I would equip this skill only if the raid requires a lot of shield protection. And the awakening skill Symphonia provides shields to the allies, damage and debuff to the enemies, and fills up a 1 full bubble for the identity gauge. Now let's move on to the skills which will supply bubbles for you. The speed of bubble gathering is what separates a good bard from the other bards. There are 4 main skills to supply for bubbles, which include the Prelude of Hurricane, Wind of Music, Soundholic, and Dancing Harp. And of course, there is the awakening skill Symphonia, which gives you a 1 full bar of bubble immediately. Depending on the combat stats, the amount of bubble you can gather from an individual skill will differ. While high specialty gathers more bubble, high agility reduces the cooltime of skills, which sort of makes bubble gathering speed even. So, whether to set up for specialty or agility is completely up to the user's preference. Next up, the identity skills. This is the part where you have to make a choice to either provide heal or attack buff for your party. The identity skills use up all of the bubbles in the gauge to provide according percentages of heal or buff depending on how many bubbles you have. The most ideal use of 3 bubble identity would be to apply the debuff skill first when the enemy is about to be impaired, then use the 3 bubbles as the attack buff, then use the heavenly place simultaneously for stacks of party attack boost. However, there will be cases where you have to use the bubbles for heals. Let's move on to the engravings for a bard to discuss more details about the heal. The 2 most crucial engravings for a bard are the Awakening and the Desperate Salvation. The usual cooltime of Awakening Symphonia is 4 minutes and 40 seconds and is limited for only 3 uses per 1 raid. But with level 3 Awakening, the cooldown time is reduced to 2 minutes and 20 seconds and you can use the Awakening skill up to 6 times per raid. So, the Awakening engraving allows you to use the Symphonia more often, which leads to a quicker supply of the bubbles. And the Desperate Salvation engraving boosts the heal as explained earlier. The engravings I will list from here are useful engravings for Bard which can be chosen according to your personal preference. And here is a very common version of a Bard's skill tree for raids. As conclusion of this video, although Bards may seem easy to play, there is a huge difference between Bards who have good understanding of the raid and Bards who just think providing shield and heal is enough. I hope this video provided you with better understanding for the class and act as a basis to set up your own style of Bard. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye.